Yeah, Andrea. We can't hear you. You're on mute.
Hello everyone. Hello everyone. I'm Andrea Plesha. I'm from Druid, and I'm also one of the founding members in Druid. I've been there since the beginning, and I took part in the development of the platform before me becoming a chief growth officer. So I can help you if you have also technical questions.
Great. And at the end of the session, I would request Andrea, you and Alex, both of you, if you can also give some kind of guidance what a good chatbot scenario is, or what are some of the things participants should keep in mind when they are creating chatbot solution, or if you are aware of any common mistakes people do usually. So that will really be great insights for them.
Yes, this will also be handling as part of the training. So we thought of after each chunk of configurations that we are doing, we can have 5 to 10 minutes to take some questions if there are any questions. While in the end, if there are still other questions, we can have 5-10 minutes reserved for questions. Okay, so I guess every one of you has received access to our community version of Druid platform. I'm also going to share my screen now. I'm going to access a tenant that is hosted on Druid community as you have, so that we'll be on the same scenario with the same configurations in place. Also, I want to tell you from the very beginning that in the help section here, once you get access to the tenant, you have available materials with regards to chatbot benefits, how you can build chatbots, what are the main areas in Druid platform. Plus, there is also a section called solution templates, where you have some starter kits, some starter solutions that you can import on your tenant and start with the sample steps. There is a starter kit for Uipath, and for each starter solution, you get also some indications on how to configure the chatbot and how to import it into Druid. I just wanted to show you a bit just this schema, and then I will go to the configuration part, just to show you what the role of a chatbot in this scenario is. So basically, from Druid Chatbot, you have access to all the robots, all the automations that you have developed within your organization. You can trigger both attended and unattended processes, and you can receive feedback from your RPA process directly into the chat in an asynchronous manner, so that if you have a long-running process and you want to continue the conversation with the chatbot, you can do that. And whenever your conversation ends, you will be receiving the feedback from your RPA robots. So in this way, RPA robots now can talk. So they are part of the, are engaged more with the human that is interacting with the process. Good. So starting with the main part, so you have a chatbot already created on your sample tenants. The best way to work with chatbots is to have all your configurations wrapped into solutions. So you choose from the list of chatbots that you have on your platform, the one you want to configure. And for that one, you can have several solutions already created. Each solution consists of a set of configurations. So for instance, if you have a production tenant and a development tenant, you will be doing configurations on your development tenant, wrap them into solutions, and import them on the production tenant after they are tested. So the best approach is to have this wrapped into solutions. Now, if we go just a quick intro on the bot designer area. So you have this wheel here, and you go on the bot designer area where you have some a general part here where you can configure on which languages the chatbot can be available in. We have support for 45 languages. If you have activated more than one language on your chatbot, on the flow designer area, and you will be, I'm going to explain you what is the flow designer area. For each conversation step, you will have placeholders for each language where the chatbot, for each language that you have activated, so that you can place there translations and specific messages for that language. We also have support for machine translation. It will go into production with the release that will come next week. So you can activate an SDL account and automatically the chatbot will translate the conversation into the from English to other 43 languages, and from those languages to English. So from the base language that is activated on the chatbot. In this machine translation scenario, you will not have to translate for each language that is activated. And moreover, you don't need to activate here any language on the chatbot. Only the bot language should be English. And you can say Chinese, please, Indian, please, Malaysian, please. And the chatbot will switch from English automatically to the language that you have chosen. These are the parameters that you have to set for the live chat conversation. So there are situations when the chatbot cannot handle a specific process because there are exceptions in the loop. And in that case, it can redirect to a human operator. It can do a live chat integration. And you have here in the solution template area also the live chat starter kit. If you want to put agents in the loop, we have support for both single and multi-chat, meaning that an agent can speak either with one or multiple customers or employees simultaneously. Then you have the configuration, the visual configuration area, where you can choose for your chatbot a predefined theme from the set of themes that we already have in place. You can choose an avatar, or you can upload your own custom CSS. Also, you have here the web chat snippet that can be embedded in an HTML page, and you can have it available as this. So this is, if you take this code and put in an HTML, you will get this. Moving further, we have the NLP area. We have here placeholders for 3 NLPs. Currently, only Druid built-in NLP is implemented. The other two are in technical preview. So you need always to select here Druid NLP. These minimum and maximum and target match scores are referring to the way the classification looks in comparing the scoring with the from the user intent against the utterances that are associated to the conversations. That is, if the user asks something and it is matched with a percentage higher than 60%, then that flow that gets the score above this will be served as direct match. If there are several conversation flows that receive a percentage between 30 and 60%, then they will be listed to the user because his question was so general that multiple conversation can be mapped to that. And the user should be more specific in choosing what intent he refers to. And if the score is below this threshold, it means that the chatbot was not able to understand, and we can decide on the intent not recognized flow what to do in the future. So can route to a human operator, or it can just register the inquiry in the conversation history database and the chatbot will and also the chat trainer will see and will have access to those information. Here we have the testing area where you can test your conversations to see the percentage of match against the training model. If on the chatbot level you have enabled auto train, it means that whenever you change the utterances on your conversations, or whenever you add a new conversation to the chatbot, or you delete a conversation from the chatbot, it will automatically it will automatically trigger the training model. If this check is not set, then you need to make sure that you go after you do the changes that I've mentioned earlier, and you train manually your model. We normally recommend not to have this check enabled because, for instance, if you create a flow that imports FAQs from an Excel file into your chatbot, then for each row on your Excel, it will run the training model and it will become not efficient. So we recommend to have this unchecked and you to remember every time you do the training, you do a change to train your model. And we have the special flows area. We have the welcome flow. So this is the greeting message that you get when you first access the flow, the chatbot. It's a normal conversation flow that can be set as a welcome message. Similar, there is the intent not recognized flow. If you import from the solution templates Druid Starter Kit, it will come with the intent not recognized flow automatically, the one that will display options if there are several conversations that match your request, and will display a message, for instance, if your intent was not recognized, to add it as a suggestion. And we have also we have other flows as well. So the authentication flow that can be added, and for each conversation that has authentication required check on it, the authentication flow is triggered. And for instance, if you add your chatbot in Teams, then it will take the information coming from Teams, and you can, in the conversation, in the authentication flow, you can take that ID of the user and check it against an employee database, for instance, and get the full user profile from the database and keep it in the context of the conversation. So this is very high level, the part where you configure the chatbot area. And now I'm going to go on the solution part. In the solution part, as I told you, you can create a new solution or you can import a solution. So if you download, for instance, a solution template from here, you will be choosing to import the solution. In the starter kit, you will have, alongside with the intent not recognized flow, you will also receive the system entities. So the entities already used by the system are automatically created here so that you can have them accessible also in the Object Explorer mode. Now I'm going to work on an empty solution. This is the welcome flow that was initially created for this chatbot. It's basically a simple flow where you are greeted with some where you receive some of the options. I will remove the training phrase from this flow because I want to create a new welcome flow from scratch so that you can see, for instance, how to create a welcome flow that gives a menu and ask one of the items in the menu is the weather. You ask for the weather, and there is a weather flow that asks for the city, asks for the date, and will pass these parameters to the Uipath orchestrator queue. and Alex will create an RPA process that calls the weather API, a public weather API, that will retrieve the temperature and will pass back that value to a response flow in Druid platform. For the time being, not to have to do training all the time, I'm going to enable the auto train check. And I'm going to force a train now. Okay, so I'm going in an empty solution and I'm going to create from scratch a welcome flow. I will call this welcome flow, welcome new. The description is welcome new. And as utterance, I will say hello, and then we can add other ones. And put here greeting as category. This is the check I was talking about when discussing about authentication required, especially used when the chat is accessed from a chat snippet or from WhatsApp, for instance, where you have only the phone number and you need to authenticate the user. If it is from the platform, the chat user is automatically authenticated. I'm going to save this step now. And I have the security role area where I have to assign which roles should have access to my chatbot. I can define custom roles from here. For instance, you can define a manager role or an employee role, and the employee has different options available in the menu than the manager, and so on and so forth. In the detail area, I can add more training phrases. This is the utterance area that I was talking about. So every time you add a new training phrase here, it will automatically train the model if the check is set. So I will put here, good day. And let's say I will put good afternoon as training phrases. I'm going to save, and on the step area, I'm going to create a step called first step, step 1. For a more complex flow, you need to put relevant names to your steps so that you will be all the time aware on what the step is doing. So I'm going to say here, hello, I am Chris, or I'm Bot. What can I help you with? Since this is the first step, I will mark this as first step. And also, because this is the only step in my conversation, I will set this as a last step. I'm going to save this now. And on the chatbot side, I'm going to attach the special flow, welcome new, and replace the previous one. And now I'm going to save. And if I go on my test page, I will see here the new welcome message. Hello, I'm Bot. What can I help you with? Now I want to build up a menu that has two items, weather, that triggers the get weather flow, and another flow saying suggestion, for instance. I'm going to name this flow menu. I'm going to add this as a description. Menu is the utterance in the category menu. And I'm going to save it. Again, I will need to assign the roles, admin and user. Details, I will keep for now only menu in the training phrases, and I'm going to add a step. Here, I would like to add a step of type hero card menu item. And I will put this as a hero card. Please choose from below. Okay, and here in the metadata area, I will have a static hero card, so it's not bind to an external source. It's not a carousel, it's just a simple card that contains only buttons with the menu items. I'm going to delete this here and I'm going to click here, weather. And I will add another button called, I'm going to put also on the values, weather, and another button called suggestions. Is first step, is last step, save. Now if I go on the chatbot area, and if I say here menu, it will get the menu. But I want to call the menu from the welcome flow. So in order to do this, I will add a new step to this flow, to this first step. You will see that automatically is last step check is disappears because I have added a new step in at the end. And for this step, I choose to trigger another conversation flow. Oh, so it's a step of type flow. And I put here the name trigger menu. I will delete this message here and I will put here the menu. Save. Now, if I go here on the chatbot, it automatically gives me the menu. I'm going to pause for a second if there are questions so far.
Andrea, can you also, hi, this is Arijit here.
Yeah.
Can you also show us how we are saving the attachments in the chatbot?
Yes, I will. I can also show you that one. So, for instance, I would like in the suggestion area to upload the file, and I'm going to suggest to do that in the suggestion area part.
Thank you.
Okay.
Andrea,
yeah.
This is Ram.
Yeah, I can hear you. Please.
Yeah, usually, chatbots will be having intents and entities, right? So here we have seen entities, but what are the intents? Like those are categories. Those fall under categories here.
Intents, or what do you mean by intents? The training phrases, the utterances that you add to build your model?
Yeah, like all the utterances, like,
yeah.
Hello, hi, all these are, kind of greetings. They come under a greeting intent. So I guess, so the intent is here, the category, right?
No, the category. The intent is the flow. So in your concept is the intent is the flow. So
okay.
Basically a conversation flow is triggered when a user intent, so a user phrase is typed in the text area. So when the user says hello, it will take that the NLP engine takes the hello phrase and compares with the training phrases that are associated for each conversation flows, the ones that we define here. And it computes a scoring for those utterances. And in that way, you will have you can identify the NLP engine identifies which conversation to be triggered when the user specifies that statement in the conversation.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I got it. Like intents are here flows, as you said. Thank
Yes, conversations, yeah.
thank you.
Okay, so going back, we have the entity area. Entities are like objects and classes into object-oriented programming, and are a way of structuring the knowledge within the chatbot's brain. Basically, the entities can be either static, so they can be just collecting information coming from the user via the chatbot, but there can also be indexed entities that can be used to train the NLP engine. For instance, I can have a connector action called get customers that builds the customer entity, and I can specify at my chatbot level that I want to use the customer entity as an NLP entity. If I check that entity to be an NLP entity, it means that when I add a training phrase in my conversation containing reference to that entity, it will look in the customer database and will extract from there the entire information contained for the customer, information provided by the connector action that has been created. For instance, if I say, give me the contract of AdventureWorks, automatically, when this happens, the chatbot will extract from the user's intent AdventureWorks as customer and will execute a search in the customer database automatically to extract the entire profile of the customer. And I can use then this profile into the conversation. So, hello, agent 007, Customer AdventureWorks has a cash level of 500 euro and has debts of 10k euro. So it will automatically provision the entity without, and this is very important, without preserving the entity in Druid platform. The entity is still preserved and saved on the customer's infrastructure, even if the customer chooses the hybrid deployment scenario or for the on-premise is obvious. But even if the platform is in cloud and only the connector action, the connector application is hosted on the customer infrastructure, all the data is still on the customer's infrastructure without the platform storing those information. Now I'm going to build my weather entity. I'm going to put weather in category weather. Categories are just a way of structuring your configuration so you know where to find an entity if you're looking for it. Now I'm going to have a field called city or city name, and it's of type string. You see here that there are a lot of types. Email, if you have a type of field type email and you collect that information from the user, if the user gives a wrong format email address, it will say that the information is not in the correct format. And also for the dates, it does validation for the numbers and IP addresses. It does validations automatically without you having to do anything special. So for the city name, I'm going to choose a string. I'm going to create another one called temperature. And this one will be set by the RPA process, and it is an integer entity. Save it, and I'm going to create another one called date. So the day where I want to find the temperature, the average temperature for, and I will set this as an invariant date. Now, once I created my entity, I should always remember that anytime I do a change on the entity area, or when I do a new connector, or when I add a new document template to be generated from the conversation, we need to go in the integration area and publish that configuration to notify the connector that I told you can be installed on the customer's infrastructure that the change has been done in the platform and to adjust the metadata that the connector is using. So every time you do a change, in order that change to take effect, you need to go on the integration area and publish. Now, coming back to my flows, I would like to create a weather flow. And I'm going to say here weather. I'm going to put a description, utterance weather, and category weather. I'm going to assign security roles. I'm going to put the user and admin. And in the training area, I'm going to add some training phrases like, what is the weather forecast? How is the weather? What are the temperatures? You don't need to put question marks. Okay, so I add a couple of training phrases here. And now if I go on the step part and I want to add a step here, I will say, I will collect in this step the city name. I put here city as the name of the step. I will choose type prompt because I want to collect that information. And I will say here, can you please tell me the city? And in the input mapping area, I will specify in which entity field I'm going to collect the information. I will choose here weather, and I will choose the field city name. Now I'm going to mark this as the first step in my conversation. I'm going to save this. I'm going to add another step to ask for temperature. I'm going to add this as a prompt step. Not temperature, sorry, I should ask for date. It's a step of type prompt. When, and I'm going to put here again weather, and I will collect the information under the field temperature. I'm going to save this, and my last step will be a step of type action called Uipath. Call Uipath, and this is a step of type action. It's not mandatory to be an action step. It could have been a message step because, as you can see, all the steps have the possibility to call connector actions on that step. And here, please wait. I am retrieving the temperature. Okay, I'm going to put this as last step. I'm going to save this. Now, I'm going to create another entity called Uipath request that will contain, I'm going to put it in Uipath category. This entity will contain the fields that I want to pass to the Uipath process. And these fields would be weather. So I want to pass the parameters necessary for the weather forecast. And I'm going to select type entity here. And I'm going to set, I reference the entity weather. So it's of type weather. And I'm going to add additional fields that are necessary for the robot to pass back the response to the Druid platform. These fields are response user ID, user ID. It is necessary to add this, it's a string, because you can send an answer to a different user, not the chat user necessarily. So you can put here the master ID of a different user, and the conversation will be triggered for a different user. For instance, a manager asks for some reports, and the RPA robot, you are asked to do those reports, and you have some automations in place. And you just ask your robot, please provide me management report. The chatbot will automatically send the request, and you can say, please provide me the opportunity report for EMEA in Q1 2020. The chatbot will understand what parameters from the phrase, will pass type of report, region, and period to the RPA process. The RPA process will automatically generate the report and can send that report to the manager directly into his conversation. So a manager receives on his mobile device, in WhatsApp, in Teams, in Slack, whatever, a conversation, hey, your report has been generated by employee X. And the manager gets automatically the report. Now I'm going to add another, so I have response user ID, and another parameter is the response flow ID. So it's the ID of the conversation flow that needs to be triggered in Druid platform when the RPA process completes. And this is of type string. It's actually a GUID, but I will set it as string. And another parameter, which is optional, is response tenant ID. This is of type integer. Okay, so I'm going again, don't forget integration area, publish, so that the connector is aware of my change. Now I'm going to configure on the apps part the connection to the Uipath orchestrator. I have here some, so Druid platform supports integration to several systems. So it has integration to Microsoft Dynamics CRM. It can connect to any type of REST API, web service, SOAP web service, call any type of database. We have ODBC connector in place, native integration with Uipath, and send email via SendGrid or SMTP. Now, if I want to create a new Uipath connector, I'm going to put here the name Uipath default, let's say, or immersion default, let's call it. Okay. And now I'm going to select what type of orchestrator I'm connecting to. It is a cloud orchestrator or an on-premise orchestrator. I will choose here a cloud orchestrator. I'm going on the orchestrator part to pick the parameters from my tenant. Okay. I will choose Immersion Labs. And now I'm going on my admin view, and I will select the tenant that I want to use to connect to. I'm going on the orchestrator API connection details, and I'm going to copy these parameters into Druid. So I'm taking the user key, I'm going here and paste it. I'm going to take the account logical name, copy and paste it. Similar for the tenant logical name and client ID. Okay, I can have also a folder name or ID if I want. I can set the default folder name. And, or Alex, is it okay to set the default folder name?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to save now. And I did a change. I need to go to the integration area. Don't forget to publish. Now my connector to the orchestrator, to the Uipath orchestrator is ready. What I'm going to do now, since I'm on the integration area, so I'm now going to create a connector action that will be called on my step to call to integrate with Uipath. So I'm calling this get weather. I copy the same name here, category weather. And I have a request entity. And I will use my Uipath request entity that I have created. And I also have a response entity, which I will select as the same Uipath request. In this case, because it will not provide the answer on this connector action because it is an asynchronous call, the response will not be collected, so it will not send back a response. It will just put a JSON object into the orchestrator queue. But for the others like SQL or I don't know, REST or SOAP, you can have here a different response entity because the call is synchronous. I will say that this is it is active. You can have collections as response. So for instance, if I want to get the list of customers and I just put here my ID, so I put the same a chat user as request entity to pass my ID and to filter only the customers that I am entitled to see, I can return here client and I mark it as client entity and I mark it as is response collection because the result will be a set of items. I'm going to save here. And now I can create tasks. Similar to the conversation flows, also a connector action can be composed of several steps. For instance, I can have here, let's say I can read some information from an Excel file and pass that information to my Uipath robot. I can have the first step here, read the Excel file, and then I make the call to the Uipath robot. For now, I'm going to add only one step and is add item to Uipath queue. I'll put this as get weather again. And now I'm going to select what connection code should I use. I'm going to load the orchestrator data. And now I have automatically access to the list of the queues available on my tenant. Alex, which queue should I choose?
So give me 1 second. So you should find something like hack Druid hack. If you refresh, I just hearing myself twice.
Sorry?
I'm hearing myself twice.
I'm going to put myself on mute.
Can you hear me? Yeah, it was from you. So you should find a queue that is called Hack Druid Training Queue from Hackathon. I've just created that one.
Is this queue created on the lab test tenant? Because I don't see it here.
Yes, it is. Then I've just created one when you asked for.
It might have some delays. Let's load the orchestrator again and find here. Nope, it's not here. I will choose a different one and wait a bit and then try to see if it. I'm using the chatbot test one.
Okay.
Okay. Here you can also see the list of your robots that are available. So if you want to assign the item to a specific robot, or if you want to assign to a specific process, you can do that as well. I'm going to save this for now, and I'm going to build the JSON object in the request area. No child mapping, sorry. So I'm going to add a field here. I'm going to call this field date. So it will take the value from Uipath request dot weather dot city name. I'm going to save it. I'm going to add not city name, sorry, I mapped again the bad field. It's called date, I think. Yes. I'm going to add the city here, and I'm going to put here Uipath request dot weather dot city name. I'm going to save it, and now I'm going to put also response user ID Uipath request dot response user ID. I'm going to add response tenant ID. Okay, so it's Uipath request dot response tenant ID add, and also response flow ID. So which flow to be triggered when the robot will finish processing. And I'm going to add here Uipath request dot response flow ID. I'm going to save this, save it here. You should also save it here to make sure that all your mappings were saved. I'm going to load the orchestrator again to see if I find the new queue. Hack Druid training queue. Okay, I'm going to save this now. Save and close, and if I go here, I see that it's yellow, so it requires publishing. I need to publish it. Let's see if it's published correctly. Okay, there is an error when publishing. I will need to put again this entity here. Publish. Let's see if it published correctly. It published correctly. Okay, so now we have the action published. We have the connector and the entities published. I'm going back to the flow, to the weather flow, and I'm going to add this action on one of these tabs. What are the two tabs available? So basically pre-actions are executed before the step is executed. So if you have a prompt step, let's say we are in here, and when here it's my mistake, I should have put here date instead of temperature. Date to collect the input in date. So if I was here and I would have put the call get weather action on pre-action on this step, the parameter weather.date will not be set because the action, it will call the connector before the step is executed, thus before the user has inputted the value on this step. If I would have put it on the post action, then the value will be available. So it's very important to keep this in mind, that when you use pre-actions, the actions are triggered, are executed before the step. So you can take the results returned by your connector action and use it in the current step. While on the post action, you need to put actions that are using the parameters collected during the current step. And also on the set variable area, where you assign values to the entities where you might assign values to the entities that will be passed to the actions, every time set variables is executed first. So first is executed set variables, then pre-actions, step, and post actions. This is the execution order. Okay, I'm going to add this. On this step, it doesn't matter where do I put it, because the value will be however the entity will be formed. So I'm going to put it on the post action. I'm having get weather entity, and I have here the set variables area, where I need to build the Uipath request entity that I'm going to pass. So I have Uipath request dot weather receives as parameter. I assign the entity weather. I assign the entire entity because it will copy field by field. Then I will put Uipath request dot response user ID. I am going to use entity chat user, and I will select from chat user master ID. This is the unique identifier of the user. Uipath request dot response flow ID. I will leave it empty for the moment because I need to build a response flow. And I'm going to use here Uipath request dot tenant ID, response tenant ID, and I'm going to put here chat user dot response no, not tenant ID, sorry. Dot tenant ID. And my entity now is built. So I'm going to save this. And I need to build the response flow. In order to build the response flow, because I'm lazy, I'm going to clone my existing flow. So I clone my existing flow, yes. I will set the name as being weather response. I will remove the training phrases because I don't need these training phrases. It will be triggered only by the robot. The security roles are the same. They were cloned. And now I'm going to delete these steps here. And I'm just going to display a message. Display temperature. It's of type message. And the temperature Alex, you will be passing the weather entity, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so I'm going to use values from the weather entity. The temperature weather dot temperature add in. And I'm going to use in the conversation weather dot city name. So the temperature is in city on, and I'm going to put the date. Weather dot date. Okay. And I want to make this temperature field here bold. So, okay. And then put here Celsius, degrees. Okay, I'm going to remove the input mapping. The metadata is set is first step. I will also put it to last step. And now I'm saving the flow step. Okay. If I go here and I say, how is the weather? It says, can you please tell me the city? And I will say Bucharest. When? Today, or should I say next Monday? And now if I'm going on the orchestrator part, and afterwards I will pass this to Alex. And if I'm going on the queue, I will see that there is one item waiting to be processed. I'm going on the, Alex, I'm not seeing the queue. It's on the next page. Hack Druid. I'm going here and view transactions. And I see that there is one transaction item on the queue containing the date, so next Monday, city, Bucharest, response user ID. And I will come back to this because it's an important part, and there will be, if you don't set correctly your user, you will not get the response. Response tenant ID and response flow ID is empty because I didn't set the response flow ID. So in this case, there is an issue because the robot will not know what flow to trigger. So I need to go on the flows area and take the weather response flow ID from here. It's a GUID flow ID, copy, and I'm going to the flows area in the weather flow, and I'm going to set this value here. Save it. Why? And since I'm here, I also want to say that it's very important that your user in the platform has the field master ID set. If you use automatic provisioning, there are some internal Druid actions called save identified user, add roles, and save authenticated users that need to be called as pre-actions or post-actions once you have the user profile. And you need to manually set chat user.master ID from whenever it comes. If it's an employee ID coming from the employee system, or if it's a master ID coming from Active Directory, you need to have this master ID always set, because if you are using Uipath integration, it should know to which user to pass the response. And that's the reason why for the hackathon, I recommend you to put it manually. So to put the master ID here manually, it should be unique at tenant level. So, but if you duplicate, the platform will not allow you. So you need to put this master ID on your user. Okay, now I save and I put another transaction item in the queue. Alex, you will take over from here.
Okay.
I'm going from the menu. City, it's Bucharest. I'm putting the date today, and now the item should be in the queue.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay.
Can you mute yourself, please? Because I'm hearing
Yes.
myself, right? Okay, good. So before going forward on the second part, you had some questions added in the chat. So there were a few questions regarding the data, the input, the entities, the variables, and so on. So let me share my screen and I will explain to you what's the difference and how everything is processed. Also, please, before going on into the Uipath part, please unmute yourself. So let's take like 5 minutes to answer all your questions in terms of the Druid part, the chatbot part. So one of your questions was what's the difference between entities and variables. So in Druid, entities, think about like their objects. So all the objects can have variables. So an entity has multiple variables in it. So fields or variables, it's the same. Okay. Also, you can have, Andrea,
Wait a second, Alex. So fields are of different types. It can be a field of type entity, it can be an entity list, it can be an integer, you saw all the types. While variables have a different syntax, are marked with @sign. So instead of using square brackets, you use @sign, and are only strings. They cannot be of different types. So if you want to collect into, let's say, into a variable of city name, you will have @city on your input mapping, and this will be only string. You cannot collect, if you collect a date in a variable like I did, if you say today, it will not interpret it as a date. It will understand as string today. It will not understand it's a date. So this is the difference between entities and variables.
Also, as far as I know, it's also, you told me that there is a difference in terms of the context and what is remembered, right, for the variables instead of entities.
No, yeah, the entities are, the variables are available only on the conversation. So as long as you are in the flow, while entities are available with the fields across the flows. So in the entire context, these you can use, for instance, variable city in 2 flows, but it will have different values. But if you use weather.city in another flow, it will take the value that was set by the previous flow. So it's shared, the context is shared among conversations for entities, while for variables, it is available only at flow level.
Good.
At conversation level.
Thank you, Andrea. Next, we have another question. Is it possible to map 2 inputs at the same time, like city name and date values being passed at the same time? And how will the chatbot identify the respective mappings? Can you give a bit more details? I'm not very sure we got the question. If you are still with us, Arpan.
It's like, tell me the Bucharest temperature for today. So, if I input this sentence at once, would it be able to?
Yes. So,
yeah,
so in order,
you say, Alex.
So in order to extract the entities, you need to design the flow as it is. So to extract the 2 entities, the first entity would be, in our case, city, and the second would be the date. Okay, so then these 2 fields will be sent to the Uipath. Okay.
And you need to configure if you click on Alex, if you click on add contract RPA attended trigger flow, you see that there in the train, it's the second flow opened. No.
The second flow.
Hi, Alex. Yeah, sorry, late response.
No.
Yeah, my question was about the city and the date being passed in two different steps.
In the training phrase, so you can, if you add the training phrase like is in here, so if you put here weather dot city name for and weather dot date, then the chatbot will know that for that placeholder he should interpret the fields coming from the training phrase, and at flow step level on the input mapping area you have skip if known, a check mark. So if you check that skip if known, if the value for that field comes from the training phrase, so from the user utterance, it will not ask you, so it will not render that step. It will not ask you, please tell me the city, because it already understood the name of the city from the training phrase. Also here, what Alex was saying, you can have here, please tell me Uipath request, or I don't know, umbrella entity dot city, where city is an entity of type city. And in the training area of the chatbot, in the entities part, you can have an external source to provision the city entity, to query for the city entity. Get me all cities in Europe, let's say, a connector action that runs an SQL data query. It should be a synchronous query. And when you say, give me information, give me the weather for umbrella entity dot city, where city is a field of type entity city, it will look into the index search, like a lookup search, and will get the entire city with zip code, with city code, and all the values for the city entity.
Okay.
Yeah, hi, this is Mona Lisa this side. I had a question.
Yes.
In the Druid platform specifically, how do we handle parallel conversations? When I say parallel conversations, it's like if my backend Uipath integration implementation is taking more time, let's say the backend process takes 20 seconds or 30 seconds. In the meantime, we have to somehow engage the user. How do we kind of have the conversation in the front end and in the backend wait for the reply from the from the Uipath process and show it back in the chatbot? Do we have that feature?
From this perspective, I think Druid has one of the best feature. So everything it's asynchronous. So think about like you are triggering the Uipath robot. Okay, then you can continue your conversation. So the chatbot is not waiting directly for the Uipath robot to come back. So you can continue your conversation, and then when the Uipath robot finish the process, like 20 seconds, 30 seconds, I don't know, then it sends back the information back to Druid. And this is something that is quite nice. So what happens if you are in a conversation during in the same time when the robot comes back? It adds the information in kind of a queue in Druid, and the chatbot is waiting for you to finish the current conversation that you are having with the chatbot. And when you finish the conversation, then it gives you the information from the robot, right?
Oh, okay.
Okay,
Maybe
and that's done automatically.
Okay.
Alex,
Okay.
there are some questions here in the chat. So there is one question: if user uploads the picture in the chat, which location they are stored to you for Uipath bot to pick up? So when you configure the Druid connector, which is the standalone application, or if you're using the Azure, there is a setting there. You can also specify the location where the files are uploaded. Otherwise, it creates a default location. And whenever you upload the file in the conversation, there is a specific flow step called flow file upload, and you put in the input mapping an entity field or even the entity of type file. It's a system entity. On the Uipath robot, you put the file dot link. There is a property on the file entity called link, and it will take the link. You also can have, for instance, activated Uipath data services on your tenant, and you can store there the information. You can persist the values of file link there, and you can pass and you can take from Uipath data services the values of the files. There is also another question. Is this feature good during the time of developing bots between various team members working on a project, or this feature can be made live on our websites or apps to auto-respond? I'm not quite sure if I get the questions. Alex, if you understood the question.
Can you give us some more details about what you are thinking here to better understand? Herman? I don't know.
Hemant, you are still there? You are on mute.
Okay.
I think we can move on to next question in that case.
Yeah.
Can
Hi.
you please? Yes.
I have one question. So, Chatbot is all about, within the same session, getting the responses and all. So, at Chatbot side, session is maintained. But when it comes to orchestrator, how would that be maintained?
So, sorry, I don't think I got the questions. Can you repeat, please?
Like, so is there any, multiple people open, but and each user is asking for a the flows are going in different way. So so the orchestrator would be the same, right?
Yes.
Be processing.
Yes, it will be the same one. Good. So then I see that there are a few questions more. I will after I will present also the RPA part, how to go back to the chat, but I will again make a short pause to get some new questions and also to answer to the questions that are here. And with this, I will start to explain how it works, and we'll also answer to your question right now. Okay, so so the chatbot sends the information into the orchestrator. So that's at the point where we are. So let's go into our queue, and I will explain how the robot will know what to process and where to trigger back the information. Okay, so if I'm going to, let's open this this queue, we can see that we have two new queue items. Okay, and we have multiple information here. Okay, so we have an object which is a JSON object. That's how Druid is sending the information. We have the fields that were sent, like the date in this case, and also the city. What are the other things that are important to keep in mind? Is the response user ID. So what is the response user ID? It's the ID of the person that was making the request. So in this way, the chatbot knows to go back, the robot knows what chatbot to trigger back. So to know in this case, to trigger a response to Andrea Plesha 1234. Okay. Also, then as in orchestrator, Druid has multiple tenants. So then we need to know to which tenant to trigger. So then we have the second information here, response tenant ID. So in this way, we know where to send back the information, to which tenant. So we know we have for now the tenant and also the user, to which user to send the information. Okay, then we have the response flow ID. Do you want to make it big? I think it's better for you to see. Then we have the response flow ID. So that, as you saw in Druid, the conversation is built in flows, and each flow has a specific and unique ID, right? So based on this, it will know on what conversation to trigger back to Andrea. Okay, based on the flow ID that I've got received. I can also use other flows IDs depending on what I'm doing in the robot. Maybe I can change the conversation totally based on what decisions the chatbot, the robot, it's doing, and based on that to take different decisions, to go on different paths into the conversation. Like, I don't know if it's not eligible for credit, or if it's eligible for credit, then I will make the conversation a bit different in the chatbot. So then I will trigger different flows, right? And then the only thing that is unique everywhere is the execution ID. So that's exactly the point. It's like if you developed in web, it's like the session ID. So in this way, you can track exactly can have a good traceability and know exactly when and what was what trigger. Okay, the execution ID. Okay, then are the tenancy name, which is Uipath starter 1. You can go here, Uipath starter 1. So that's how you get the tenancy name. Okay, the Druid-Based URL, it's sent automatically even if you didn't saw there. Druid-Based URL, if is the whole URL here. Okay, good. So let's see what we have in Uipath. So before starting, I would like to present. I will give you access directly to two templates that you can start with. One is for unattended and one for attended, because I know there is a lot of information to be covered in just 2 hours. So I will give you access to this simple framework unattended, which are some templates. So you can start from there. I will just create a new one now, and I will go back to the one that I started already. And I will explain what we have there. Okay. Okay, good. So here at the beginning, very similar with all the reframework and frame all our frameworks. We need to load some config files, and we have in the framework 2 config files, one for get Uipath config file and one for get Druid config file. Both of them are reading some JSON files, which are for config. If also, if you have any kind of question, just please interrupt me so then I can answer directly, not at the end. Okay, so I will go in the framework so to look what we have in the config file. Okay, so this these two, you don't need to modify. These are standard for Druid. Then we have Druid-Based Service URL, which is basically the URL that of the service. In our case, it's this one. So then I can take this one from here, right? And I will cut this. Then is the tenant, right? Which is the Uipath starter one. So in this way, we can also make very easily the configuration. And then in order to send information back to Druid, we will need a username and a password to send information back. How we're going to send the information? We have a custom activity built by Druid, which sends information back and triggers a new flow in Druid, right? So we will need here to set up the username and the password. Give me 1 second to take the username that Andrea provided to me, which is in this case user.api, and the password is druid1234. So with this, I made the configuration for Druid, so then it knows to go back directly there. Okay, then let's also look. So I saved this. I think I saved this. Now let's also look into the Uipath config file. Here it's very simple, which is the orchestrator folder. In this case, it's the default one, and also which is the queue name that we are going to play with. Okay, so I go to the queue. I don't know by heart, so I'm gonna copy. So I'm going to take this and I will add this queue name. Okay, so these are the config files that we need to configure. Okay, good. Now let's go back to the main. So I'm loading this config file. Then, as you imagine, we are going to take the transaction item. If we're going, it's using the queue name from the config, also the folder path from the config file, and it's deserialize the information from that queue item directly into a JSON object, which is called data from Druid. Okay. Then once that we load the data, then we need to have the process itself, right? So we have the business part here, which you can, this is an example here, business process uno. If I open, this is an empty one. But to give you an example, as you are going to use, if you want, of course, the template. So it's which are the input the fields and which are the output fields, right? For the process. Once that you make the process, in this case, to take the weather from website. So in this case, we'll just go very, very simple from Google and take the through UI automation. But first, let me go through the framework. Okay. So coming back, I remember that I take the output, like the temperature in this case. Then we need to pack this up into, again, some kind of a JSON file, JSON object, and send this JSON object back to Druid. In order to make your life simple, we've already done most of the work. So everything that you'd need to add the information into the Druid callback, which is this. And you have here Druid entity field 1, field 2, and you need these fields. If I go here, you need these fields to be changed appropriately with the entity field that it's in Druid. I think in this case it's temperature, right? And we are going to use just one. Okay, good. Then we need to send back the response to Druid. So I will open this workflow. I will try to explain what we have here. This is a build also for some more complex workflows where you want also some try catches, response codes. So, for example, the robot might throw errors, and then how you manage the errors and so on. Or you want to have some out-of-the-box messages back to the chatbot. That's why you are going to see here more things, right? So there are two fields that Andrea did not tell you about, which is the response code and the response message. And if in this way, it's more like a best practice here. So if it's a response code, you can set up a response code and decide if that's a success or a fail from the robot perspective. And also you can send like a message. If it's a success, you can send a message. If it's a fail, you can send a different message. Okay, good. So this is for the response part. So we take here the entity name where I want the information to be inserted in Druid. If you remember, Druid it's with entities. So in this case, we will go and insert the information. Not here. I don't have access into the Uipath request. This is the entity where we are going to insert the information. Okay. Then we can set up the response code and the response message. We are going to not use in this scenario. And then we pack up everything for Druid. And at the end, we trigger the conversation back to Druid. You can see here that there are a lot of fields. So let's go from down to the top. So for the web APIs, if I'm going back here, so you can very easily see Uipath Druid config. All right, the start flow resource is exactly this one, the one that it doesn't need to be changed. Base service URL is the URL of the platform. Authentication resource is the one that you don't need to change. Okay, then is the username and password that you already set it up here, username and password, and also the tenant. Okay, and then target user master ID. It's the person to who I want to send information. Also, like for creativity, because we are here in a hackathon, the simple way is go back to the same person, right? With a response to the same person. But think about more than that. If I'm a manager and if I want to send information to everybody that it's in my team, I can do that because I have the possibility to set the user master ID. So if I know the user master ID of every employees in my team, I don't know, we can take this from Workday or from a HRM system, then I can directly send information to all my team. You can send this and you can extrapolate to the company and other stuff like that. So not just coming back to the same person. Okay. Then we have the flow ID. As I said, as Andrea explained already, the flow where I want to send the information. Sorry, the flow that I want to be triggered. So the conversation that I want to be triggered. The execution ID, I've already explained, it comes directly from the queue. And the only thing that it's always changed, it's Druid data. And Druid data, it's the JSON that needs to be mapped with the entities in the Druid. Okay. So let me make this big and let's start doing, right? So first of all, let me open another project where I have already the, or let's do it very easily. So let's create the business process, which takes the weather very easily. Okay, so let's use the recorder, as it's not something specific for here. So we are going to use the new recorder. I'm going here. I will pause. I will go to google.com, right? I will open this one. I will type some information here. Weather in Bucharest, and I don't know, 10 of November. And then a Google search, a click, and then we will take the text from here. Right? Great. Let's save this. And the recorder build everything. Guys, also if you have questions, just please interrupt me. Right? So that would be the best way, because in the end, the purpose of the workshop here is to help you to build. Right. So let's change this as we need just one output field, which is temperature. I will get the text here. And as input field, first one is city. And then the second one is date. I will take it like this, and then we will see what we need to change in terms of text data manipulation. Okay, so let's add here the city, and also here the date. Okay. Did I miss in date? Good. So now we have the business process to take the information, right? Good. Now let's see how the information is extracted, and let's go one by one. So try to process, and here we need to map the information from Druid. So as I said, it's called data from Druid, right? And let's see what's exactly the property of this this JSON file. So let's look into transactions. Let's look at details. So the first one is city. Right. And then is the date. And the date is exactly like this. Right? And what we have is the output temperature. And let's call this temperature. And we will need just one field. We don't need the second one, right? And the Druid entity field name. Let's look also again in Druid and see how this it's called. So we go into the entities and to the Uipath request, and the field it's, you gave me the entity.
Yeah, I gave you the entire entity. No, I gave you on the request, I gave you field by field, I think. Let's check.
But when I put,
yeah, but when you want to return the result, you need to return into weather. So you deserialize in weather entity. Yeah.
Oh, okay, so then we'll put back the information into weather. Come on. So the fields, and the field is called temperature, right? So then let's look here and then change this Druid data callback with exactly the temperature, right? Good. What else we need to do? As we don't have any response code and response message, then we go to response to Druid, and we are going to delete this section or just comment out set status code and error message. Okay, that as we don't need this. Okay, entity name in Druid, and here we also to
name. You need to put weather for Druid entity name. I'm not sure if you used weather or request.
Yes. So for going back, the entity which we need to put, it's exactly as Andrea said, weather, right? So here, let's look if it's already sent into the queue. So then we can easily take that dynamically from the queue or not. So let's look.
No, it's not set. We should have used another field called the response entity, and we should have set it as a string with the name of the entity we want to deserialize in. So there should be another field, response entity of type string, where you can take the name of the entity from. We missed that out. Now you will hard code it here.
So as we don't have, then we will add it manually for this exercise. Okay. So Druid data entity, I will move it here, and I will add directly weather. Okay. It's very important. So that's for the template, because you can see here, like there's something very specific to Druid, like you need to specify entity type name with $sign and so on. So that's why I've created also the template here. Okay, good. So let's see how it works and if there are things that we are missing or things that are a bit different than what I have already into the flowchart. Okay, so let's go step by step. So I will start debugging this. Okay, so let's load the config file. Let's go to Druid data. Let's take the transaction. We log this. We can see the whole information. Great. Then we try to process. And in the process, now we are going to go and see how this is used. So if I go here to intermediate, we can go to see in city. Let's do it like this. You can search here, you can directly see what's the values of the arguments here. So in city, here in the intermediate. So in city, in date, in temperature, it's out. I'm very curious to see if it can take directly this information, and Google knows to take information. No, it's not weather in. Oh, I didn't put. No, it's not. Doesn't know. So it will break. So then let's just for the purpose, I'm going to take the date, but you can have it as it's. We are low on time, so I'm just giving the city for now. Okay. And now let's go and take that transaction again. I will just clone this one, so you always have one to play. Okay. As you know that everything works until here, I will change the breakpoint to this point. We have the simple one used. And now it's at the break. Now let's see, in the Druid callback, we have the temperature. Okay, let's say Druid callback, temperature. Which is 12, which is good. So now let's go forward in the response to Druid. And now let's go step by step, and we having something to log. I'm setting up the entity name. Then we go through each field that I want to go back, to send back. In this case, will be just one. Then we serialize this information. So if I'm going to Druid data and string, we can see here the information serialized. I also log. And now I think the information from the queue is not exactly what we have in the template. So that's exactly the last step. So let's then change properly. Okay, so I will stop this. For the moment I will, so here what I'm doing, I'm logging all the information from the queue, from the config file, and from the item. So let's look in the following. So in data from Druid execution ID, let me check directly if this is the same. I'm looking here. So execution ID. I have. Let me check also here. So then we can also have this this log very beautiful before step. Good. Callback flow ID. We don't have, I don't think we have a callback flow ID. Here it's called response flow ID. So then we need to change this instead of callback flow ID to response flow ID. Okay, so I'm going to change this, and also here at the flow ID is not called callback flow ID, it's called response flow ID. This is something that you can design as ever you want. These are some points like ours from our suggestions as best practices. Okay, then it's target user master ID, callback user master ID. I think also here it's called response user ID. So then we also need to change this one. Right, so then also change here. Response callback user master ID. Right, and let's make this response flow ID, response user ID. Okay, great. Response user ID, password, we know that we take it from config. So that I think that would be all. Okay, let's make another clone. Right, and then let's try it again. Let me close this, as I didn't close the Chrome. So let's run it again. So I'm press continue. It's doing the weather. Then it's going back. It's stopping the breakpoint. Okay, so let's go one by one into the response to Druid. And now we knew that until here everything worked. I forgot to comment that out. Right? So everything seems to work. And now if we want to make a double check before of that, before sending this, come on, be with me. Let's see. Injure. Oh, I don't think I can do it from Druid. Nah, I don't see everything very easy. Come on, can you? Yes. So in data, Druid from Druid execution name. We have this one. And response flow ID. We have this one. And the last thing, response user ID. We have also this one. Okay, so let's step over this and also log the response from Druid. This is its success, error null, unauthorized.
I received in the chat.
You received?
Yeah.
Great. So I just continue and finish it. Okay. So can you send another queue item, please? I'll make this to remove. Did you send, Andrea?
It's ready.
Ready? Good. So then I will start this again. So I will just run it. And as we come to the end in terms of time, we're not going to show you also the attended part, but let's take some questions. And also, I know that in the hackathon now you are going more like over the. So you received the answer, Andrea?
Yes, I'm going to share my screen now to see.
Great. So
do you see my
yes.
my screen? Yeah.
Yes, we can. Yes. Good.
Okay.
Now,
yeah. So there were some questions in the beginning and afterwards in the chat with regards to Excel connector and file upload. I'm going just to show you a sample on how to configure very quickly a file upload. I'm not going to go into details. This is a self-training chatbot that learns from Excel. So in order to upload the file in Druid, you have to choose a step of file type upload, and that's it. You don't have to add anything else. And in terms of integration, when you want to read data from Excel, save Excel file to database. This is one. No, this is. Let me find an Excel connector quickly. This one is not. Okay. This one is, so you choose from here, read Excel file. And when you configure it, you put the document generator code. You have to create an app called the document generator. And in the response area, you pass the request entity file, and the read field for file name, you put file.filename. And in the response area, you take the columns from Excel and you map against your entity. And basically your Excel will be in the context of your entity. And if you want to train the chatbot, you can, this one, for instance, has the test, an utterance, let's start. And I can I can upload an Excel, and I'm going to show you just very fast how the Excel looks like. So it's your FAQ bot. You have an Excel with this structure. So you have category, roles, answer, question one. So these are the utterances, question one, question whatever, how many utterances you want to put, and answer. And we just take, I'm going to close it. And I add phrases in this Excel. And what I do in the conversation, I just need to upload, attach a file. I'm going here, I take the file, upload it, and the chatbot automatically will process the Excel file and will call the APIs of Druid platform to learn by itself. And there were several questions that were in the chat with regards to file upload and read data from Excel.
Great. Thank you very much. Also, there is a question regarding when they get the message translation of no intent identified and how to resolve that. Can you pick it up?
Yes, so in the special flows area, you have here messages. In your case, probably you have put a language and you didn't provide the translation on a certain step in the placeholder for the message area. If you want to put a friendly message there, there is here the point where you get the message. I need to find here. I'm not sure where the error code is. If you might give me on a separate note, or can we connect? Because I don't know exactly the context of your error. There is something as a friendly message that you can add here. But my guess is that you haven't added a translation to all the placeholders for the languages that you have activated. So you need to go on your flow, and for each language that you use in the conversation, you need to put a translation. Also for the set variable. So in the set variables, because you can assign strings, you have to put values on all the translations. If the same value, you can just assign that value for each placeholder per language.
Good, thank you. There is another question regarding what's the reason for the chat user mastery to return a null value? What can we do to avoid it?
Yes, if chat user master ID returns null, you need to go to the users area here, and on your user, you can, to see all the users, show chat users, you put this check here, and on your user, you go edit, and make sure that you have this value set here on master ID. You can set it manually. Normally it can be set automatically by the provision flow when you create an authentication flow, but for demo purposes and for hackathon, you can set this value here manually. It should be a unique value, a string. It doesn't matter what you put here. It should be set. It shouldn't be null.
Okay, good. So to go to an end, I would like to add some interesting things. As I said, so you are now at a hackathon. You would like to go above the simple RPA. You want to win the hackathon with something innovative and so on. So to give you some ideas of where we think chatbots are best to use, and Andrea here can give you some ideas also. So first of all, there are two types of chatbots. So that's like basics. Internal chatbot and external chatbots. The internal chatbots are basically for employees. So you can think about them as assistants, and you can plug in them as many RPA processes as you want. and then you can offer this chatbot as an assistant to, I don't know, to HR, to logistics, to the finance team, and so on, like one assistant in chatbot, which has tens of RPA processes automated behind the scene. Okay, so like leave request, certification, reports, taking holidays, setting out of the office, give me, I don't know, the marketing campaign, the results of marketing campaign, how much money I've spent, how much money to add a receipt, an invoice, so to process different documents and so on. Then you have the parts which is external, which is for the customers or for your clients or for partners, where could be less self-service bot. And there you can think about around the customer service, how you can improve the customer service interaction. So in a simple manner, think about like, hey, you want to change something in your contract. I don't know, if you have a leakage with your water and you normally you are calling, hey, I have some problems with my water. Then how you could do this with a chatbot? Because the beautiful thing here is that behind the scene, the RPA can do and go in all these systems and perform all these processes, can go and create a request, turn that request into a process, send that information to the field, and all this, you can have AI fabric in place or some kind of best next action. So for example, I'm very upset of your service and I want to leave. Okay, what you are doing, maybe you can have some sentiment analysis in that RPA process, and you realize that, hey, that's something very, very bad, and you trigger a special offer. Or you want a renewal and you know the profile of the customer has changed, so then you can offer something unique to that customer based using one of our models from a fabric. All right, or more or less
or you can register a claim request. For instance, your flight got canceled and you want to register a claim request. You upload the scan of your receipt. You use document understanding from Uipath to extract the data from there. You can use AI Fabric for risk assessment to see if that customer qualifies or not for the claim. There is also the possibility for internal chatbots to embed it in Uipath Assistant. So if you have a chatbot that is doing, for instance, help desk, and you want it to be a part of your Uipath Assistant, with the new feature of creating widgets with the latest version of Uipath Assistant, you can create and embed your chatbot directly into the web, the Uipath Assistant. And I can chat with my chatbot directly here in the assistant. I have here the processes that are available on my PC, and here I have the chatbot that will trigger those processes for me, like provisioning a virtual machine, resetting password, checking network speed, checking my firewall settings, and so on and so forth. Registering tickets into different Jira, ServiceNow, and so on and so forth. So there are plenty of use cases. You need to be creative.
Great. Thank you very much, Andrea.
Thank you.
There's anything else that you would like to tell to our guys here for us for the end? Something that to give them, I don't know, anything?
I just want to thank them that they have registered and they are willing to try Druid platform. I wish them all the best. They'll make the best participant to win. And also, I wish them to be creative.
Yeah.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Alex. Alex, we had one question that if there are any.
Question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So does Druid support integrating with APIs, like, so for one of my use case, I need to get data from API. Then, I need to input that data to the RPA process. So in that case, while, showing it to the user.
Yes, you can call directly. You can also call the UI. So you can use the REST connector in Druid or the SOAP connector. It depends on what type of API you're calling. You have to define an app of type REST and also go to the integration area and create a connector action of type REST. But also you can call this, you can make a call to the Uipath process by passing the parameters you want to send to the API call, and in the process, call your API, send back response, call another process, send back response, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, sure.
So we have a question. Do we have any resources or a link of API documentation from Druid?
Druid platform APIs you're referring to?
Yeah.
Or I'm not sure, I need to check. There are some, there is some, but I'm not sure if it's a public. There are APIs, yes. Okay. I need to check, and I will, I don't know where we can answer to your questions.
So I will post, if you can share any other resources, I will post under the event itself. So people, when they go for the recording, they can see the resources as well.
Okay, yes. I will take the question and check.
Alex, do we have any other training course on the Druid, Andrea?
There are recordings in the help section here. You have some recordings here in this in the help area. And also, if you look on YouTube channel, I think also on Uipath, there are a lot of there are some videos with sample chatbots that are created, integrated with the Uipath.
Great.
So you have here some recordings under these different sections. So for instance, for the integration area, if you want to connect to APIs, you have here detailed documentation.
Hi, Andrea. Priyanka this side.
Yes.
Hello.
Andrea, you talked about the API integration with Druid.
Yes.
So I would like to ask you, like, how we can test the API in the Druid. Like, do we need to pass the parameter while testing the API, or it will fetch it from, whatever we have provided in the request section?
So you have here the REST connector, where you put here the base URL. In this case, this is a call to Druid platform. Let me choose another chatbot that calls service now. Like this chatbot. So here in the apps area, you have the ServiceNow API. You put here the base URL, and if there are some security specificity, in this case there are no, it's a public one. And when you configure the integration for ServiceNow, in this case, you have here at connector step the test function where you can create an entity, and you can put some values. So you put comma here, your entity field name, the value, and you run the test button, and you can test in this way your API call.
Okay, so we don't need to pass any parameter while testing. So when you go to test, like you can find, a parameter section. So if we have any parameter for the URL, we are calling, right? Yeah. So
yes,
if
you are calling here, so you put here the parameters, but you do mappings with the name of the parameter. So if it was here, you would have had something like @user ID, and in here you would put user ID and you put the name from a Druid entity. And when you create the test method, you need to pass this parameter as part of the request. So here you need to put comma user or whatever the name of the field is in the parameters area. You can put here the parameter user ID and the value 1, 2, 3. Save it and then test.
If we want to pass the user ID password for that REST call, like for ServiceNow API, if I go to REST API Explorer, I am supposed to pass my account ID and password. Where do we pass that?
You put them here when you put the base URL. So on the apps area where you configure, you put here the variables and you select what type of security you have. If it's a bearer token security, then you have to provide here bearer and the bearer token. If it's a custom security, you can have authentication methods that generate the token and other methods that renew the token once the token is expired. And once you set those methods in here, the platform will automatically check if the token is expired. It will automatically call the renewal of the token.
Okay. And what if is it a user ID password, not the bearer token? Or
you put them in the key value user, put the user password, and you put the password. That it will know to interpret this. So it's similar to Postman. If you're using Postman, the UI is similar to the Postman application. Okay.
And Andrea, you have created the entity set for UiPath separately, and you have linked the weather entity to UiPath entity, right? So
yes.
Is there any need to create a separate entity set for UiPath, or can we just pass the weather entity directly to the UiPath? Can't we do that?
Yes, you can. Of course, you can. It's just a matter of structuring your knowledge or your objects. It's like when working with classes in object-oriented programming. You can have a big class, or you can choose to denormalize it to have a relationship among classes. I chose that because you saw that I added some extra fields that were not relevant for the weather entity, like response entity name, response field, flow ID, response tenant, and so on and so forth. Things that were specific to UiPath. That's why I didn't want to load the weather entity. It's not a good practice to load the weather entity with additional fields that are not in the context of that entity.
Got it. And one more thing, like you told me the difference of entity and variable. So you told me whether variables are the used to store the string value, or it stores the string data. So suppose we are creating the this ServiceNow API connector, and we have a variable over there to create a token, suppose.
Yep.
So
yeah, you should assign that variable if you want to pass it to a connector. A connector doesn't take into account variables. You should assign it in set variables area to a field in the entity that will be used in the connector action as the input entity. You saw that on the connector action part, there was a request entity and a response entity. The request entity calls the parameters that you pass from the conversation to the connector action. That is, if you collect your information in a variable, you need to assign that variable to a field of the entity that will be used as request entity.
Okay, so what if the token is storing as a part of a string, because it's a security concern, right? So it should not store as a string value.
Yes, you can store it as a string in a field in the entity, or I'm not sure if I have a better token example. You can, sorry?
For password, it should not store in the string, right? I mean,
yes, but you don't store them. You configure them here on the apps area where they are stored encrypted on the configuration of the connector side. You don't pass it to your request in the connector action. You just configure them here in the variables area as name user, and you put the username and you put the username, password and you put the password here. You don't have to put the security information on the so the username in clear.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah,
I had
we are
one
good
more.
in time. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, we
Yeah.
one question. Andrea, how do we train Druid with, let's say I have a set of FAQs. Where do I train it?
If you have a set of FAQs, you can, I'm not, we are preparing, so you can create a solution like the one that I showed you. So you can upload them from Excel by calling the Druid APIs. I think that we can upload a template, a solution. I'm going to talk to the product management team on the community edition to upload the solution template also for FAQ import.
Right.
And Andrea, like for errors, like suppose while chatting, there sometimes
good point.
We come across with some error, right? Like,
yes, there is an error code which is a GUID, and you have here in the history and logs area, you have the conversation history log, and you can go on your chatbot, refresh, and for the errors, you can click on the magnifier here, and you will receive the message, the error message.
Okay, so is there any document or is there any something where we can find the what is that error and how we can resolve the error? Is there any forum or a document for it?
No, unfortunately, there is no forum yet. We are still in the process of building a community version. The error is quite explicit, so you will have errors such as flow has not a first step. A conversation path or flow does not have a conversation, or path not found or something, path not found. It means that you have branches in your flow and you haven't put conditions, and there are two branches that don't have a condition on them, and the flow doesn't know on which branch to go. Or there can be integration error, execution error. And for the execution error, you go on the connector area here. And for each connector action, you have connector audit log. And you have here a detailed log of, and also the errors. These are the most common errors that you might find.
Okay. And one more question, like suppose we have a different data types of in UiPath, and we have a different set of a data type in Druid. So suppose we have a data type dictionary in UiPath, so how we can map the both the data type from Druid to UiPath?
In here you need to have an entity list in Druid, and you need to build an entity list. And I think the framework that Alex has built together with his colleagues help you in building also entity collections when passing back to Druid. There is a special syntax on the entity building. I think the framework has this functionality.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Andrea. Thanks, Alex.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
So Mona Lisa and Priyanka, you had most of the questions, so I hope to see good solution from you guys.
Yeah.
And also Andrea and Alex, if you have any other resources which we can share with all the participants, so you can share that and I will send them email.
Great.
Okay. Thank you.
Also not related to this session, to other participants, if you are participating in any other category like apps, custom activities, data services, and assistant. We have a similar session tomorrow where we will have a product members, experts from these categories. You can ask any question. This is not going to be a hands-on session, but open forum where you can ask any question or whatever you may have. And also finals, if you are reaching to finals, that will happen for first and second category. Final will happen on 2nd December, and third and fourth category, it will happen on 3rd December. We will send you communication for that as well, so that you can block your calendar. Okay, we are good. Thank you so much, Andrea and Alex, for your time.
Thank
It
you.
was really great session, and to the participants, I will share the recording with all of you once it's available.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Bye,
Keep our
everyone.
fingers crossed for you.